Hi, my name is Kathy. I just wanted to come and just share a little bit about my shaman journey with you guys. Not everybody's story is going to be the same as mine, but I just wanted to share with you guys what I went through just to get to where I am now. I hope you guys all had a wonderful holiday and a happy new year. Share in the comments below what your New Year resolutions are. Can't wait to hear all about it. And we can get this video going. So, I wanted to start off with what my experiences were prior to me, you know, going to do the shake test and finding my teacher. Um, for me, when I was a little kid, I think I started experiencing more of like haunting stuff, more vivid dreams. Um, I know that when my grandpa had passed away, he lived with us in our home, and after his passing, I I was there to see his struggles and stuff like that. But after his passing, he I went to school, and usually every day that I come home, I always see my grandpa, sitting by the window. He's just sitting there, just watching us come home. And, after his passing, I remember walking home by myself, and I looked up the window and I see him sitting there. And I'm waving to him. And then after waving to him, I quickly ran into the house to see if he was in his room like he always is. So when I went in, there was nobody there. It was just an empty room, nobody there. So that was, one of the things that I experienced. Another experience I had encountered was after my aunt had passed away. I had this really, really scary dream of her coming back, and she didn't look human like. She was kind of like limping a little bit, like up the stairs, making her way to me. And I remember I was so scared in my dream that I ran back to my room and I closed the door, and I knew that she was coming, and I was so scared. So those were just like some of my like scary encounters, and I didn't know that this is part of my journey. Absolutely no clue. We used to practice shamanism a lot when my grandpa was still alive, but after his passing, we kind of just steered away from my parents and them just kind of steered away from that. Um, and it's exhausting. I'm not gonna lie, it is. And so, fast forward. I got married. Had I had a kid at that time, and I remember I was sleeping out in the living room with my son at that time. Um, and it was dark in the living room, just me and my son in bed. And I remember seeing like one of my like grandma from California. I know she passed away, but I don't know if it was like my grandma from California or my dad's mom, which is also my grandma. And I remember waking up, and I was like, why is there who's sleeping next to my son? Because it was me, my son, and then another lady there. And I was like, well, that's strange because my husband's not in bed with us yet. Like, who is this? And I'm looking over it. It just looked like an old lady. And then it didn't really dawn on me, but then I ended up like going back to sleep because. And then the next day I woke up and I was like, oh yeah, I think I saw like a grandma or something sleeping next to us. But it didn't. I know it should scare me, but it didn't really like scare me. Um, but the thing that scared me was when you can't see them. You can feel them, but you can't see them. And this was way before I even found out that I had corning. So fast forward, we lived up in Bethel, um, in the country area, and we everywhere I went, I always felt like there were just like things looking at me, things that were there, yes, spirits that were there. When I would go downstairs to do laundry, whether it was day or night, we had like open windows down in the basement, and it wasn't like we didn't have curtains and stuff. But whenever I go there, I always felt like there's like somebody or just things, just their hand on the window, they're just staring at me, they're watching me, and I always get so scared. I used to get so scared all the time. I used to get really scared during like thunderstorms at night. I get really scared when it's like dark, like a dark room. I'd be like turn off the light and I would just race up into our bedroom and I would run into the bed because that's how afraid I am. Even when I had to drive at night or early in the morning when it's dark out, I would get really scared because I feel like I can sense things, but I can't see them. I felt like I was going crazy, um, and so which that caused me to have a lot of anxieties. I always had a lot of anxieties and fears of my family and not being able to protect them. Because we're driving so far into the city with the snow and all that stuff, and you just never know. So I had a lot of anxieties of that, and I have a lot of anxieties of seeing things and not knowing what they are. And then I also went through depression. I always kept hearing like this negative voice in my head, always just telling me I'm not good enough, and I'm not gonna make it through this world, through this life. It was really really hard on me. I went on medication, I went on therapy, like it helped for a little bit. Don't get me wrong, it helped for a little bit, but then after that, like it stopped helping, and then eventually I started seeking help, like going to go see some shamans, just asking them like, oh, I'm going through this and this, like what could be wrong and stuff. And that's when it started slowly kind of opening up my eyes, where they're like, oh, well, you could be gifted, you might have cloning. And none of this really like got brought to light until my oldest sister, when she started going through her journey. And that's when I realized that I could see the things that she was telling me. Like I could be in that same exact room with her as everything that is happening to her. Um and like for me, it's like the more you talk, the more things start to open up and I can start to see. And it's like it's so hard because it's almost like you have your own imagination in your head, but you're actually there. It's really confusing. It's really hard to explain it. But she was going through her journey was when I found out that I may have a calling, and then I went to go seek a few shamans to see if they can confirm it. I had two that said that I am not a person who's gonna be shaking on the bench, and then I had one that said that I wasn't a shaman. And then the teacher that I have now, I went to go see her, and um, she was able to tell me what guys I have, and that's when I knew, okay, like I want her as my teacher. Could I be a potential student? Am I good enough? Am I ready? All these questions are just coming to me. But I also felt like, sorry, my husband and we're shouting over there. But I didn't feel like I didn't know if I was ready for this. But I knew that I really wanted this. Um, but then it's like what everybody else saying, or maybe not everybody, but for me, I'm like, is this really true? I have a lot of doubts. I'm very skeptical. Like, if this is true, is this really possible? Like, am I really a shaman? Can I be a shaman? Can I be a good one? Can I face all the backlash of the goods and bads that are spoken about, in the community in regard to shamans? You know, I I I took a lot of considerations, a lot of pros and cons, but I realized that this is what I really wanted. And when I finally accepted that I do have Corning, all my fears and my depression just went away. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to be the same for you, but that this is what happened to me. The moment that I admitted that I do have Corning, my anxiety and my depressions went away. Um, it was like I was like a whole new person. I think for me, I felt that moment that I admitted that I have spirit guides, I felt protected. I no longer had the fear. Like I knew that whatever fear I had, I knew that they were going to come and protect me. And that's how I stopped being afraid of the dark. I stopped being afraid of, bad things that could happen. I stopped being afraid of thunderstorms. I know, weird. I know. But that is some of my symptoms and what led to it, and what led to like what sort of abilities or whatever you guys call it, whatever I had. Um, hearing things and seeing things. That's how I found out that I have Corning, and this is a journey that I was willing to take on. So I wanted to talk about how my first shake session went. Um, it was so hard. It was so hard leading up to the day. I I went through a lot of tests. You can, if you want to call it that. I, of course, I had the negativity, like just talk in my head, that was like really pushing me, and like just like I had a lot of doubt in myself. And then my kids started getting sick. That was another test. And then I started having like some like relationship issues where my husband and I kind of started like bickering and stuff. It's like, what is going on? Like everything was fine. Everything was fine. Nothing happened. The kids were all fine and stuff. And now I'm going through all this stuff. And I started seeing things now. Okay. So there was one morning I dropped my kids off to my in-laws' house, and I see this lady. She's in like a white outfit, and she's like, her hair was really long, and she's just standing there in the cold. She's standing in the grass in the median of the roads, and I was like, well, that's strange. Why is this thing just standing there? Went about my day. The morning of, I usually go to the garage, and I went to the side of the driver's side, and I'm carrying some stuff with me, and I'm walking up to the driver's side, and I hold my key up, and just as I was about to unlock my car, I see this like entity, the spirit. It just standing in front of my car with its hands on my hood, long hair, and it's just standing there. It's standing there, and I'm just staring at it like, what in the world am I seeing here? I wouldn't say I was scared. I was just kind of like, what is going on? And I unlocked my car, got into my car, started up, and then I just drove off. And then I called my husband. I was like, I don't know if this is what I really saw or not, but I just saw this lady in front of my car. It looks kind of creepy. And then I finally made it to my teacher's house, or my teacher's place, and we started the shake test. I was super nervous, didn't know what to expect. Um, with everything that had happened prior to, I almost canceled my appointment or rescheduled my appointment. It was that bad. Well, to me, it was that bad. And so when I sat down, I was so weird, so silly. But I was like, so do I close my eyes or do I open my eyes? And my teacher said, whatever comes naturally to you. So eventually, when I put on the red cap, I closed my eyes. But when she started hitting the gong, I wasn't shaking. I wasn't going anywhere. So then, but I could feel myself like rocking back and forth. It just wasn't shaking my bells or anything. So then she told me to stand up. And when I did, I was rocking more intensely back and forth. But my hands were still down. So she told me to raise my hands up. And when I did, I that's when I started shaking my bells. And I was still rocking back and forth. And, prior to me shaking my bells, I came across this, like, image, right? I was on a dirt road. There's a gate. And at the gate, there was this, like, Asian lady in, like, the Chinese monk clothes. And she was standing there, really, really pretty, just smiling at me. And behind the gate was a dirt path that led you to the house. And behind the house is like a huge mountain in the background. So then when I started shaking my bells, that's when I was able to get past the gate, walk up to the house, and that's when I saw a really thick cloud, right? A thick cloud, and that's when I saw a dragon head popped out. And he said to me, what took you so long? And I'm just like, I don't know. But I'm here now. He was still not happy with me. But then he transformed into like this old guy, old man, with the long cloak and all that stuff. And we walked through kind of like a study, and it was like there's just so much books on the walls, on the shelves and stuff, just so much books. And then I saw this huge bird fly through, and the bird said, "Ho," and I was like, "What? Like, what am I supposed to do with this?" And they're like, "Say it." And I was like, "Ho," like, what? Why am I saying this? And then they showed it to me in closed caption, "Ho." And then all of a sudden, my teacher was like, "They said you can hear them, so you just gotta repeat what they say." And I was like, "Even if it's just 2 words?" And she's like, "Yep. Even if it's just 2 words, just say it." And I was like, they're like, "Say it." And I was like, man, I'm gonna sound so dumb. Sound so dumb when I say this. So then I was like, okay, here goes nothing. And I was like, oh, and I kind of chuckled a little bit. Because it's so uncomfortable when you first start to chant. You're chanting in front of somebody you barely know. And my husband was there too. And it was just like, oh my gosh. So I was like, okay. It's almost like, you're trying to start up a dead car that's been dead for like forever, and you're hoping it works, right? So then I was like, ho, and then nothing. And I tried again, ho, ling, and then another word came out. And then after my third attempt, that's when everything just started coming out. Do I know what they were? Do I know what they're saying to me? No. But it all just kind of sounded like Chinese. Like they were just coming out. Kind of a little bit mixed of Hmong, a little bit mixed of Chinese, but they were just all coming out, and I'm like, wow, okay. So then I was done. I was done, and I it was just it was a big accomplishment. Really, really big accomplishment. I don't know what a teacher looks for in a student, um, but my teacher said that not a lot of students can chant, um, or is able to chant on their first session. Usually it takes a little bit, but I was just one of those who could chant, which, thinking back on it, I was way overdue. Like, when I went to my session, my reading session, my teacher said, I am 10 plus years overdue. I was supposed to be on the journey a long time ago, and it makes a lot of sense with all the haunting, all the things that I was going through. Like, it makes so much sense. And it just, it was just a relief, to know that I am, not overthinking it, like, like not putting it in my head, like, no, I am a shaman, I am. Um, it just, it just a relief. And I forgot to tell you guys. So when I first was on the bench, I, I was kind of rocking back and forth. I can't remember if it was after I started shaking, but I, I just felt like this rush of emotion that just hit me, that just hit my heart, and I was just so sad. I don't know. I was so sad. I was so heartbroken, but at the same time, it was almost like a relief, And I was just like crying, and I wanted to cry like a big baby, so bad, but my teacher gave me a couple seconds, just to let it out a little bit, and then she's like, okay, like you can't cry because if you cry, you're, it's gonna make you dirty. You're not gonna be clean. So then I had to like suck it all up back in my eyes, and then and then the rest happened. But yeah, so that is how it all started and how I found out that I became a shaman. And in the next video, I can talk more about, you know, what happened to me leading up to raising my first shrine. And I just wanted to say thank you to you guys. If you guys gotten this far, thank you for listening to me. And hope to see you guys in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for um, tuning in on Between Drums and Dreams. Thanks.